I was scrolling through Facebook mindlessly liking pictures of people's vacations when I saw it. A huge family barbecue at my cousin's house, the kind where everyone brings their kids. The dogs are running around the yard, and the tables are covered in way too much food. My entire family was there, everyone but me. The first time it happened, I told myself it was an oversight. The second time, I thought maybe I'd missed the invite. But this time, I knew better. I stared at the pictures, flipping through them one by one, feeling my stomach tighten with that familiar mix of hurt and resignation. There was my brother, standing next to our dad, holding a beer and laughing like he didn't have a care in the world. There was my cousin Lisa, the one who used to ride bikes with me when we were kids, posing next to the grill. Even my great-aunt Margaret, who barely left the house anymore, had managed to make an appearance, but not me. I took a deep breath before typing out a message to my mom, keeping it as casual as possible. Hey, I just saw the pictures from the barbecue. I didn't get an invite. Was it last minute or something? I stared at the screen, waiting for the dots to pop up, feeling stupid for even asking. A few minutes later, her response came in, and I already knew what it would say before I even opened it. Oh, sweetheart. We didn't think you'd want to come. I actually laughed out loud, but there was no humor in it. It was the same excuse they always gave, as if they were doing me a favor by excluding me, as if they had my best interests at heart. It didn't matter that I had never once told them I didn't want to come. It didn't matter that I had never given them any reason to believe I preferred being left out. They had decided for me. Again, I could have responded, but what was the point? I could already picture the conversation in my head. If I pushed back, they'd act surprised. If I got upset, they'd tell me I was being dramatic. If I pointed out that this had happened too many times to be a coincidence, they'd find a way to make it my fault. So instead, I put my phone down, walked into my kitchen, and poured myself a glass of whiskey. I had spent years waiting for them to see me, for them to remember that I existed outside of birthdays and obligatory holiday texts. I had spent too many nights making excuses for them, convincing myself that I wasn't being intentionally excluded, that I was just imagining things. But I wasn't imagining it. It was real, and it wasn't going to change. I took a long sip of my drink, staring at the wall, letting the bitterness settle inside me. And then, without thinking, I grabbed my laptop and opened a new tab. If my own family didn't think to include me, if they believed I preferred being alone, then maybe I'd show them exactly what that looked like. I pulled up a travel site, my fingers moving faster than my thoughts, searching for the most expensive, over-the-top resort I could find. Not some cheap hotel with a pool, but something extravagant. Something that would make their eyes widen and their jaws drop when they saw it. It took me less than 10 minutes to find the perfect place, a 5-star resort with a private beach, infinity pools, and suites so luxurious, they had their own butlers. It was stupidly expensive, more than I had ever spent on a trip in my life, but I didn't hesitate. I clicked book now, feeling an unfamiliar thrill rush through me. I wasn't going to sit around waiting for another non-existent invitation. I wasn't going to waste any more time wondering why they never thought of me. Instead, I was going to live the kind of life that made people wish they had thought of me. As soon as the confirmation email hit my inbox, I picked up my phone again. My mom's message was still sitting there, unread for over an hour, waiting for a response. I could have said something, could have played along like I always did, but I didn't. Instead, I left her on read, shut off my phone, and started packing. The moment I stepped out of the airport and into the private car waiting to take me to the resort, I felt an unfamiliar lightness in my chest, a feeling I wasn't sure I had ever truly experienced before. The driver opened the door for me with a warm smile, the kind of polite courtesy I wasn't used to receiving. And as I slid into the plush leather seat, I let out a slow breath I hadn't realized I was holding. I wasn't going to spend this trip dwelling on my family, on their indifference, on the years of being left out and forgotten. I was here alone, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't have to worry about anyone but myself. The ride to the resort was like something out of a travel documentary, the kind where the landscapes are so impossibly beautiful that you assume they must be edited to look that perfect. The ocean stretched out endlessly on one side of the road, sparkling under the midday sun, while lush green hills rose up on the other, dotted with villas that probably cost more money than I would ever see in my lifetime. By the time we pulled up to the entrance of the resort, I could already feel my shoulders relaxing, the tension I had carried with me for years slowly unraveling. A staff member greeted me the second I stepped out of the car, offering me a cool towel and a drink before leading me inside. The lobby was enormous, all sleek marble floors and towering windows that let in the golden afternoon light. And for a brief second, I felt completely out of place. But then, the concierge handed me the key to my suite, addressing me with the same warmth and attentiveness I had never once received from my own family. And just like that, the doubt disappeared. I belonged here even if only for a little while. The suite itself was ridiculous in the best possible way, floor-to-ceiling windows that opened up to a private balcony overlooking the ocean, a massive bed covered in crisp white linens, and a bathroom that was probably bigger than my entire apartment. I set my suitcase down by the door and walked straight out to the balcony, letting the warm breeze wash over me as I took in the view. This was what it felt like to be treated well, to be somewhere people actually cared about your experience, and I realized then how rare that feeling was for me. After unpacking, I did something I never usually did on vacations. I took pictures. Not the kind where you awkwardly pose for the camera, trying too hard to look like you're having fun, but the kind that actually captured what it felt like to be there. The sun casting golden streaks across the water, the way the light hit the whiskey glass sitting on the balcony railing, the perfectly plated dinner that I had ordered without a single person at the table questioning my choices. And then, without overthinking it, I posted them. I didn't add long captions or try to make some dramatic statement. I simply shared the moments as they were, letting the images speak for themselves. I didn't expect much of a reaction. I had never been the type to command attention on social media, but within hours, my phone started buzzing. The family group chat, the same one that had been silent toward me for months, was suddenly very much awake. Wow. Must be nice. Aunt Linda commented under one of my photos, the same woman who never remembered to include me in holiday dinners, the same woman who always conveniently forgot to add me to the guest list. I stared at the message for a long time, feeling something inside me shift. The old version of me, the one who always tried to be polite, who always tried to smooth things over, might have responded with a fake laugh or some self-deprecating joke to make them feel more comfortable. But I wasn't that version of myself anymore. Instead, I left her on read. It was the smallest, pettiest thing, but the satisfaction I felt in that moment was unlike anything I had ever experienced before. They had spent years making me feel invisible, treating me like an afterthought. But now, for the first time, they were the ones waiting for my response, and I wasn't giving it to them. A few minutes later, another message popped up, this time from my cousin Lisa. We need to talk. I stared at the screen, my mind racing with possibilities. What could she possibly have to say to me now, after years of silence, after all the times I'd been ignored and excluded? I didn't have the answer, but I did know one thing. I wasn't in any rush to find out. I put my phone down, poured myself another glass of whiskey, and stepped back out onto the balcony, letting the sound of the waves drown out the noise of everything else. I was here, I was happy, and for once, they were the ones left wondering what they had done wrong. I woke up to the sound of my phone vibrating against the nightstand, the screen lighting up in the dimly lit room, casting an eerie glow across the ceiling. I groggily reached for it, expecting maybe a notification from my bank about another ridiculous resort charge, but instead, I was met with an overwhelming flood of messages from the family group chat. It had been mostly dormant for months with the occasional check-in or holiday greeting, but now, suddenly, it was alive with activity, buzzing with messages stacked on top of each other like an avalanche I hadn't asked for. At first, I ignored it, tossing my phone back onto the bed and rolling over, determined not to let them invade this small pocket of peace I had carved out for myself. But the messages kept coming, relentless and insistent, filling my screen with a mix of forced concern, passive-aggressive remarks, and thinly veiled accusations wrapped in faux warmth. "You should have told us you were going alone." My cousin Lisa had sent that one, her words laced with a disapproval I could practically hear through the text. "Is it safe to be at that kind of place by yourself?" My Aunt Linda chimed in next, suddenly invested in my well-being despite never having so much as checked in on me when I was sick or struggling. "We're just worried about you, that's all." My mother's message came last, sitting at the bottom of the pile like a carefully placed landmine, waiting for me to step on it. I took a deep breath and stared at the screen, my fingers hovering over the keyboard, debating whether to engage or simply let them stew in their own hypocrisy. For years, they had conveniently forgotten me, brushing me aside with flimsy excuses and half-hearted apologies. But now, all of a sudden, they had the nerve to act like they cared. It wasn't about concern. It wasn't about safety. It wasn't even about me. Not really. It was about control. They weren't upset that I had gone on vacation alone. They were upset that I had done it without needing them. Before I could decide how to respond, my phone rang, the name Mom flashing across the screen in bold letters, a call I knew I couldn't avoid forever. I sighed, pressing the phone to my ear, bracing myself for whatever carefully rehearsed guilt trip she had lined up for me. "Ryan," she said, her voice laced with that familiar mix of exasperation and forced sweetness, the tone she always used when she wanted something from me. "Why didn't you tell us you were going on a trip? We had to find out from Facebook like strangers." I let this silence stretch between us, knowing it would make her uncomfortable, knowing she expected me to scramble for an explanation to justify why I had dared to make a decision without consulting the family first. But I didn't give her that satisfaction. Finally, I exhaled and said, "I didn't think you'd want to know." The line went quiet for a moment, just long enough for me to picture her face twisting in frustration, her mind racing to come up with a way to spin this back onto me. And then, right on cue, she let out a dramatic sigh, the kind she used to give when I was a child, when she wanted me to feel like a burden. "That's not fair, Ryan," she said, her voice softer now, dripping with carefully crafted disappointment. "We didn't invite you to the barbecue because we didn't want you to feel uncomfortable. You always seem so distant at family events, and we didn't want to pressure you." I closed my eyes, pressing my fingers to my temple, feeling the familiar weight of her words settle on my shoulders like an old worn-out coat. It was always the same routine, the same twisted logic designed to make me question myself, to make me feel like I was the one who had pushed them away instead of the other way around. But this time, I wasn't playing the game. "You're right, Mom," I said. My voice so calm, it almost startled me. "I should have invited you guys. My bad." The silence on the other end of the line stretched longer this time, long enough for me to know I had caught her off guard, that she hadn't been expecting me to agree so easily. She had been gearing up for an argument, for a back and forth that would end with me apologizing for some non-existent crime, but instead, I had given her nothing to latch onto. "Well," she said finally, clearing her throat, "maybe next time. Let us know before you do something like this. It just feels like you're shutting us out." I almost laughed at the sheer audacity of it, at the irony of them feeling shut out when I had spent my entire life being the one left on the outside looking in. But instead of wasting my breath pointing that out, I simply said, "I'll think about it," before hanging up and tossing my phone onto the bed. That night, as I sat at a candlelit dinner table overlooking the ocean, a glass of whiskey in one hand and the other resting lightly on the pristine white linen, I took a picture. The soft glow of the candles, the deep blue waves stretching out into the darkness, the untouched plate of gourmet food that had been served with the kind of care I had never known growing up, it was all perfect. And then, without hesitating, I posted it with a single caption, "Next time, I'll think about inviting you guys or not." I took a slow sip of my drink, knowing exactly what kind of storm I had just unleashed, but for once in my life, I didn't care. Let them wonder. Let them stew. Let them feel for even a second what it was like to be on the outside looking in. The reaction came faster than I expected, a flood of messages and passive-aggressive comments that I knew were meant to make me feel guilty as if I had done something wrong by simply enjoying my own life without them. My phone vibrated nonstop for the next hour, each notification another reminder that they only seemed to notice me when they felt like they were the ones being left out. "Wow. That was kind of rude," my cousin Lisa wrote, her words clipped and clearly irritated. "You're being really immature," my brother added, which was almost funny considering the fact that he had never once picked up the phone to check on me before this. But suddenly, now that I was ignoring them, he had something to say. "We've always invited you to things, Ryan. Maybe if you made more of an effort, it wouldn't feel this way." My Aunt Linda chimed in, conveniently forgetting the years of silent exclusions and forgotten invitations that I had long since stopped questioning. I read each message carefully, letting their words sink in, but I refused to respond, refusing to give them the satisfaction of thinking they had successfully pulled me back into their cycle of guilt and blame. They wanted me to feel bad, to apologize, to act as though I had been the one in the wrong, but I wasn't going to give them that power. Instead, I let them sit in their frustration knowing that, for the first time, it was them waiting on me instead of the other way around. I went about my day as if nothing had happened, lounging by the pool with a book in hand, sipping on a cocktail brought to me by a staff member who treated me with more kindness than my own family ever had. The sun warmed my skin as I leaned back in my chair, closing my eyes, letting the noise of their messages fade into the background, refusing to let them take this moment away from me. But then, an idea struck me so suddenly that I nearly laughed out loud, a plan forming in my mind that was so simple yet so undeniably perfect that I knew I had to go through with it. They had spent years making me feel like an afterthought, like I was the one who had to chase after them, always waiting for an invitation that never came, always being the one left out of their carefully curated family gatherings. But what if, for once, I flipped the script? Without giving myself time to second guess, I grabbed my phone and opened the family group chat, my fingers moving quickly across the screen as I typed out a message that I knew would send them into a frenzy. Hey, let's have a family dinner at my place next Saturday. Everyone's invited. I hit send and waited, watching as the little dots appeared almost immediately, the responses rolling in faster than I could have imagined. That sounds great. We haven't done something like that in forever. Finally, it's been too long since we all got together. Let me know if you need me to bring anything. The enthusiasm was immediate, the eagerness dripping from their words, and I sat back, letting the irony of it all sink in. They had never forgotten to invite me. They had never once accidentally left me out. They had simply never cared enough to include me, not until now, not until they thought they might be missing out on something. I smiled to myself, feeling an unfamiliar sense of satisfaction wash over me, a quiet kind of victory that came from knowing I had finally turned their own tactics against them. They had spent years making me feel invisible, treating me like I was only worth acknowledging when it was convenient for them. But now, for the first time, they were the ones waiting for an invitation, the ones hoping to be included. The best part? I had absolutely no intention of hosting anything. I let my phone rest on the table beside me, picking up my drink and taking a slow sip, savoring the moment, knowing that this was only the beginning of what I had planned. They thought they were coming to my house next weekend, thought they had successfully pulled me back into their world on their terms, but they had no idea that the only person who would be enjoying that evening was me. Let them make their plans. Let them clear their schedules. Let them sit in anticipation waiting for something that would never come the same way I had spent years waiting for them. It was about time they knew what that felt like. By the time the sun started to set on Friday evening, the night before the so-called family dinner I had no intention of hosting, I already knew exactly how I wanted to end it. I had spent the last week reading their texts, watching them buzz with anticipation, exchanging little plans in the group chat like we were suddenly one big, happy family. It was almost funny how quickly they had shifted from forgetting I existed to fawning over the idea of being at my table, in my space, like they hadn't spent years making me feel like an outsider in my own bloodline. The comments had gotten more personal too, as if being included, for once made them feel entitled to everything: my time, my gratitude, my effort. One message from Lisa said, "I can bring the dessert. I know your oven probably hasn't been used in a while." Then my brother jumped in with, "What's the dress code? Or are we pretending this isn't a big deal?" Even when they were trying to be involved, it came with that familiar edge of condescension, a reminder that no matter what I did, they never really took me seriously. So I did what I knew would hit hardest, not with yelling, not with drama, but with the kind of cold, deliberate silence that they had given me for years. Around 8:30 that night, while I sat at an oceanfront restaurant under string lights that swayed gently in the warm breeze, I had the waiter set up a single place setting. A pristine white tablecloth, polished silverware, a glass of whiskey catching the last orange streaks of sunset. I had them light a candle right in the center, and once everything looked just right, I snapped a picture. The caption came to me easily, without hesitation, without doubt. "Table for one again. Some things never change." I posted it and put my phone face down on the table, the screen still glowing through the linen as the notifications immediately began to pour in. I didn't look at them right away. I took my time sipping my drink, savoring every bite of the overpriced but perfectly cooked steak, letting the tension build in their heads as they processed what I'd just done. I finally picked up the phone about 15 minutes later, not because I was dying to see their responses, but because I wanted to watch the chaos unfold in real time. The family group chat had erupted. "Wait. What? I thought we were coming over tomorrow." That was from Lisa. Her usual composed tone cracked open by confusion. "I have the salad stuff packed. Are we still doing dinner or not?" My Aunt Linda, who had gone from forgetting I existed to suddenly being the self-declared co-host, "Ryan, are you serious right now?" My brother's message came last, short, and clipped, exactly how I expected him to react once he realized he wasn't the one holding the reins anymore. I waited a few minutes before responding, just long enough to make sure they were all looking at their screens, waiting on me. Then I typed my reply slowly, deliberately, the same way they used to answer me, just enough words to sound innocent, not enough to hide the sting. "Oh, I didn't think you'd want to come." I imagined them reading that line, their faces twisting in recognition, their memories crashing down around them like bricks. I knew exactly what they were thinking. How many times had they used those words on me? How many times had they brushed me off with that fake concern, that performative guilt, only to carry on with their plans like I never mattered at all? For a few minutes, no one said anything. The chat went dead, just a wall of silence that felt heavier than any screaming match could ever be. Then came the excuses one by one, like rats abandoning a sinking ship. "Oh, well, I was going to be busy anyway. Honestly, this whole thing was kind of last minute. I guess next time we should talk more directly." I read each one like it was a script I had seen before, a play I had once starred in without realizing I was the punchline. They weren't sorry. They weren't hurt. They were just embarrassed, caught off guard, facing a version of themselves they didn't like seeing in someone else's mirror. I didn't reply to any more messages. I didn't need to. The silence said everything I wanted to say. I signaled the waiter for another drink, leaned back in my chair, and watched the moon rise slowly over the water. For the first time in years, maybe for the first time ever, I wasn't waiting on anyone. I wasn't hoping to be included or begging to be seen. My phone vibrated again, another message I didn't bother to read. I turned it off completely, dropped it into my bag, and let it go. Whatever came next, I'd handle it. But right now, I was exactly where I wanted to be, alone, content, and finally at peace. The vacation was supposed to last only 7 days, but as I packed my bags on the final morning, I found myself hesitating. The thought of going back to my regular life, of potentially having to face my family after what I'd done, sent a wave of anxiety through me that I hadn't felt since arriving at the resort. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my half-packed suitcase, when my phone buzzed with a text from work. A client had canceled, freeing up my schedule for the next week. It felt like a sign. Without overthinking it, I walked down to the front desk and asked if my suite was available for another week. The receptionist smiled and tapped at her keyboard. "You're in luck, Mr. Ryan. We actually have your suite available for the next 10 days. 10 days. Even better than I'd hoped." I handed over my credit card, feeling a strange mix of defiance and freedom. This wasn't part of the plan, but then again, neither was being systematically excluded from my family's lives for years. Back in my room, I sent a brief email to my boss explaining that I needed more time away, and then I turned off my phone again. I wanted to exist in this bubble for as long as possible, this place where I was treated with respect, where my presence was acknowledged and even valued. The second week of vacation felt different from the first. Without the initial burst of anger and revenge driving my actions, I found myself actually relaxing, actually enjoying the simple pleasures of the resort, the early morning swims in the ocean, the quiet afternoons reading by the pool, the conversations with strangers at the bar who knew nothing about me or my history. I made friends with one of the bartenders, a local named Carlos who had been working at the resort for over a decade. You know, he said one evening as he slid another whiskey across the bar to me, most people who come here alone are either running from something or looking for something. I laughed, swirling the amber liquid in my glass. Maybe it's both. Carlos nodded thoughtfully. My grandmother used to say that sometimes you have to leave home to find where you belong. I thought about that a lot over the next few days, about what home really meant, about whether it was a place or a feeling or maybe just the people who made you feel like you mattered. By the time my extended stay was nearing its end, I still hadn't checked my family group chat. I knew there would be messages waiting, accusations, guilt trips, maybe even genuine concern after such a long silence. But I wasn't ready to dive back into that pool of toxic emotion, not yet. Instead, on my last night, I did something I hadn't done in years. I called my dad. Not my mom, who always had an agenda, not my brother, who always had a judgment, but my dad, who had always been the quietest member of our family drama, neither clearly including nor excluding me over the years. The phone rang 4 times, and I almost hung up, but then I heard his voice, slightly rough with age but familiar in a way that tugged at something inside me. Ryan? Is that you? He sounded genuinely surprised, which I supposed was fair. I couldn't remember the last time I'd called him directly. Yeah, Dad. It's me. How are you? There was a pause, and I could almost see him shifting in his recliner, the one he'd had since I was a kid, adjusting his glasses the way he always did when he was buying time to think. I'm good. Your mother's been. Well, she's been a bit worked up lately. I let out a short laugh. I can imagine. Another pause, longer this time. You know, son, I've been thinking. Maybe I should have stepped in more over the years. It wasn't what I expected him to say, and for a moment, I didn't know how to respond. My father wasn't the type for emotional confessions or apologies. What do you mean? I heard him sigh, a heavy, tired sound. Your mother and your aunt, they've always been. Controlling, I guess. The way they plan things, the way they decide who belongs where. And I just went along with it. I didn't want to cause trouble. I swallowed hard, looking out at the ocean from my balcony, the moonlight creating a silver path across the water. I'm not calling to cause trouble either, Dad. I know that. I know. His voice softened. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. For not speaking up when I should have. It was such a simple acknowledgement, but it landed like a physical weight in my chest, years of hurt and confusion suddenly validated by the one person I'd never expected to notice. Thanks, Dad. That means a lot. We didn't talk much more after that. He asked about my trip, and I gave him the sanitized version, leaving out the parts about revenge and deliberate silence. He told me about his garden, about the new variety of tomatoes he was growing. Simple, ordinary details that somehow felt more meaningful than any conversation I'd had with my family in years. Before we hung up, he cleared his throat awkwardly. Ryan, when you get back, maybe we could grab lunch sometime. Just the two of us. I found myself smiling, a genuine smile that had nothing to do with spite or satisfaction. I'd like that, Dad. I really would. As I packed my bags the next morning, preparing for the journey home, I felt different. Not completely healed, years of exclusion and dismissal couldn't be erased by one sincere conversation, but changed in some fundamental way. I had set out to teach my family a lesson, to make them feel what I had felt all those years. And in some ways, I had succeeded. But the real victory wasn't in making them suffer or in getting revenge. It was in finally understanding that I didn't need their validation anymore. I didn't need their invitations or their approval or their attention. I had created a life for myself, imperfect and sometimes lonely, but mine, and that was worth more than any seat at their table could ever be. As the plane took off, carrying me back to my regular life, I finally turned on my phone again. The family group chat had over 100 unread messages, ranging from angry accusations to concerned inquiries to, eventually, wounded silence. I scrolled through them quickly, not letting the words sink in too deeply, until I reached the most recent one, sent just that morning from my dad. Safe travels, son. Looking forward to that lunch. I put my phone away, leaning back in my seat as the coastline disappeared beneath me. The lunch with my dad happened 2 days after I got home. We met at this old diner we used to go to when I was a kid, the kind of place with vinyl booths and waitresses who call you honey no matter how old you are. He was already there when I arrived, nursing a cup of coffee, looking older than I remembered. We ordered burgers and made small talk about sports and the weather until the food came. Then he cleared his throat and looked me straight in the eye. Your mother's furious, you know. I nodded, taking a bite of my burger to avoid responding immediately. I figured she would be. She's talking about not inviting you to Thanksgiving. He said it so matter-of-factly that I almost laughed. That would be nothing new, Dad. His face fell, and he put his burger down. You're right. And that's on me too. He wiped his hands on a napkin, seeming to gather his thoughts. Listen, Ryan. After you called me, I spent a lot of time thinking about all this. I went back through old photos, holiday gatherings, birthdays. And I realized how many times you weren't there. I never questioned it. Your mother would say Ryan couldn't make it or Ryan had other plans, and I just accepted it. I felt a lump forming in my throat. Did you ask her about it? He nodded, looking ashamed. Last night. It didn't go well. She insisted that you always seemed uncomfortable at family events, that you never really wanted to be there. When I pushed harder, she broke down and admitted something. I waited, my food forgotten. She said she was jealous of how close you and I used to be when you were little. That you were more like me than your brother is. He shook his head. It's not an excuse. It's just, well, it's the truth. And she got your Aunt Linda and others to go along with it over the years until it just became the way things were done. I sat there, stunned. All these years, all that pain, because my own mother was jealous of my relationship with my father? It seemed too simple, too petty to be real. But it also made perfect sense. What happens now? I asked. My dad reached across the table and put his hand on mine, something he hadn't done since I was a child. That's up to you, son. I've told your mother things need to change. That I won't be part of excluding you anymore. But I understand if you need your distance. 3 months later, I hosted a barbecue at my place. Not the whole family, I wasn't ready for that, but my dad came, and so did my brother, who had reached out with an awkward but seemingly genuine apology. My mother stayed home. Maybe someday we'd repair things, maybe not. As we sat on my back porch, beers in hand, watching the sunset, my brother nudged my shoulder. This is nice, he said. We should do it more often. I looked at him, then at my dad, who was dozing lightly in the chair beside us, and felt something I hadn't expected, the beginning of forgiveness. Not forgetting, I would never forget, but maybe the start of something new. Yeah, I said, taking a sip of my beer. We should. Whatever came next with my family, partial reconciliation, continued distance, or something in between, I knew one thing for certain: I would never again wait for an invitation that might never come. From now on, I would be the one deciding where I belonged, and with whom. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, that thought didn't fill me with bitterness or regret. It filled me with a quiet, steady resolve, not hoping for their acceptance, but creating my own peace. And really, that was all I had wanted all along.